Thank you all for being here today with us at CCAT. We're really thrilled to be holding this CEO discussion between 4 leaders in infrastructure research and delivery. For those of you that don't know, CCAT is the Centre for Connected and Automated Transport, and we're a collaborative partnership between government, industry, academia and community bodies with a mission to provide national leadership to support the optimal deployment of connected and automated transport. So this webinar follows on from our National Future Transport Summit, which we held last September, and that brought together over 100 organisations to agree industry recommendations on how to maximise the benefits of connected and automated transport technologies. And we're continuing to focus our events this year on those recommendations. The recommendations from the summit focused on broader public outcomes that can be achieved with these technologies. So things like safety, productivity, sustainability, and how we achieve those outcomes through mechanisms like infrastructure, which we're going to talk about today. So today we are looking at what role infrastructure has to play in meeting the challenges of today and tomorrow. Things like rising demand on the network in a really constrained funding environment. And our speakers are going to talk about how infrastructure might need to change and the role of digital, connected and automated technologies and that role that they can play in infrastructure design and delivery. We are very lucky to have an expert panel of speakers today from across industry and research. So I'll introduce them now, and following that, I will hand over to our moderator, who is Charles Gripless. He's the CEO of Connect East. So welcome, Charles. CEO and Managing Director of Connect East. He joined in August 2014. Prior to joining, Charles was the CEO of TT Line Company, Pty Limited, the company that operates the Spirit of Tasmania vessels between mainland Australia and Tasmania. He was appointed as CEO of TT Line in 2008, joining the company from Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics, Oceania. Welcome, Charles. Michael Caltabiano, he is the CEO of the National Transport Research Organisation. He was appointed CEO of ARB, the Australian Road Research Board, in November 2016, after 3 years at the helm of the Australian Asphalt Pavement Association. And under Michael's leadership, ARB has transitioned to the National Transport Research Organisation, or the NTRO, for Australia and New Zealand, with offices across those countries. And the NTRO is the trusted knowledge partner for local, state and federal governments, delivering their infrastructure standards and next generation delivery outcomes. And the NTRO is CCAT's parent organisation, so we're very appreciative of their support over the years. Welcome, Michael. So we'll go to Susan Harris next. Susan is the CEO of ITS Australia. With an extensive career in transport strategy, Susan is ideally placed at the nexus of technology and transport to translate the benefits to business and the Australian community, supported by strong connections amongst the local and international transport technology community. Susan is highly regarded for her roles supporting the growth and innovation of the transport technology sector across a range of Australian and international industry advisory groups. She is a regular advisor to government and ministers on transport technology and mobility related issues, leveraging technology to deliver seamless, sustainable and equitable transport. Susan is a strong advocate for the next generation of transport professionals and the importance of diversity in our sector to deliver the best outcomes. And finally, we have Toby Kent, the CEO of the Infrastructure Sustainability Council. Toby took the helm at the ISC in 2024, having worked across a diverse range of sectors over a 25-year career in sustainability. He joined the Infrastructure Sustainability Council from PwC Australia, where he served as a partner in the Energy Transition Team. Toby's extensive experience includes over 5 years as Chief Resilience Officer for Metropolitan Melbourne as part of the Rockefeller Foundation's groundbreaking 100 Resilient Cities program, and time with ANZ Bank as its Global Head of Sustainable Development. So hello to you all. Thank you all for being here. Hello to you, Susan and Toby, for the second time again. We were on a roundtable this morning. We're really pleased to have all 4 of you here and to also acknowledge that you're all CCAT members. We're really looking forward to hearing your insights here at CCAT, and I'm sure all the people on this call are. Charles is going to be moderating the session today. So I will hand over to you, Charles, and then we'll have time for questions at the end.
Thank you, Rahila. They were a great intro. I just wanted to ask each of the panellists a vision statement. So if we look forward, and then the follow-up questions would be more about the practical realities of what we need to put into place today. So let's think of 2035. What do you think that we need to put into place, or what is the biggest change that we require and that we need today to address transport needs in 2035? Michael, you first.
Thanks, Charles. Interesting question. Let me just wind back a little bit. As the CEO of NTRO, I'm very privileged to be able to sit on a global stage as Vice President of the International Road Federation, but also integrated as one of 7 global research entities in TRL in the United Kingdom, BAST in Germany, VTI in Sweden, CRRI in India, Research Institute of Highways in China, and TRB in the United States, and us. That's the Global 7 research laboratory grouping that I chair. And globally, there are 4 things that all countries are looking at and all agencies within countries are really focused on. It's safety, sustainability, resilience, and finance. And those aggregation of challenges are common across the globe. So for us here in Australia to bring it home, the threads that link all those things together start with data. And what we're not good at in this country is the aggregation and the overlay of data. So to forward project to 2035, we really need to understand what is the baseline from which we are beginning the journey and how are we better understanding that baseline. We collect, as NTRO, all of the nation's data set on the physical performance of every state road and Commonwealth road in the nation. I've got the full data set, and we have been collecting the full data set for about 4 or 5 years. Some states are more advanced than others where we've got a decade of data on the performance of those road systems. We now have a wonderful platform where we can overlay all the safety data, the traffic data, both volume and speed, the Bureau of Meteorology data. So we can now see through this stacked data set insights that agencies are now benefiting from to do right treatment, right time, right place. So for me in 2035, to wrap it up, we will have really high levels of insight into the performance of the network, the overlay of other things in the network, like your safety data sets, like the AI overlay, the digital overlay, every sign, every line, every tree, full understanding of the asset performance by 2035, and the decisions that agencies and road owners will be able to make in 2035 will be far more informed by the richness of data, which means that you'll be able to get much better value for money for the communities that we all serve and deliver much better outcomes in terms of the economic performance of the country and the social connectivity for our country.
Great. Data is important. Susan, over to you in terms of ITS. So 2035, I think having that overlay of data. What's your view in terms of what we need to be ready for in 2035?
Yeah, I think 2035, we're going to be in a much more connected world in terms of the technology that we see coming our way. And, we need to make the most of using different pieces of infrastructure and insights for multi-purposes. So we're just back from a study tour in Japan where we took a delegation over to Japan with ITS Australia. And what we saw there was that they were very clear on the purpose of the technology. It wasn't around technology for technology's sake, but very clear around whether it's there for managing congestion, safety, resilience, or sustainability, and also the ageing demographic that they're facing. And within that context, what we saw was that there was a very strong theme about using different sensors and different technologies for multi-purposes. So their roadside infrastructure and probe data was being integrated to be used both for tolling, for congestion management, for giving information to people, and also being leveraged for their new ITS Connect solution that was connecting straight up into vehicles. So they were able to get multiple values out of, different connected devices. We're out at Sumitomo and they talked about, again, using probe data to give better, more accurate insights around where vehicles are so that they can then leverage that rather than to manage traffic, rather than using loops in roads so they don't need to repair the probe data, they don't need to maintain it, and it was giving more accurate insights. NEC talked about using fibre optic cable, existing infrastructure to detect traffic. I know we've done that in small pilots here in Australia, but they're talking about doing that at scale. So just that connectivity across different devices, and really the ability to institutionalise these changes, so that really strong link between government and industry to develop strategy and then have a multi-year implementation vision and plan.
And that's important, isn't it? I mean, we all collect data, and data sort of it's insurmountable really in terms of the amount of data that we have, but it's actually converting that into information that we can actually utilise to improve our transport systems and across our transport systems as well. So Toby, what's your view in terms of moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think in addition to agreeing with what Susan and Michael have very articulately said, I think the other thing, and really important thing, is to not think about 2035 as some point in the distant future. 2035 from an infrastructure perspective is tomorrow. If I look at my work, where in late 90s, early 2000s, we were talking about modeling climate impacts that were going to happen in 2025 and so on. It's happening now. The future is already upon us. So we really need to be looking at what are our national commitments. We've got a net zero commitment by 2050. We need to be having more of that kind of time frame, really thinking it genuinely and in an intergenerational level and working back from that. And then taking with that, how do we use the data, to pick up on Michael's point, to plan towards that in a way we can model the future in a way that was unthinkable in just a few years ago. Similarly, while I totally I'm on board with what Susan was saying, we also have to do it, and this is one of the reasons why data rather than technology is so important. Even over those 8 years between 2035, the technology itself will change fundamentally, some of it in ways we can't think about, some of which will be disappointingly slow. So the specific technology is really hard to pick, but the data about who needs what, when, and where, that will really inform where we need to be. But again, we need to start from a perspective of further out than 2035 to have any chance of landing in a good place in 2035.
Yeah, good points. Let's bring it back to today. So, Michael, are our best roads ready for connected and automated vehicles? And if so, what is actually required? If not, what is actually required for deployment?
Yeah, really, really good question, Charles. And this is a question on most people's minds who live in the real world. And unfortunately, can be controversial at times, but unfortunately, our agencies aren't ready. And it's not that the road system isn't ready, it's the intellect and the use cases and advancing the knowledge base for a future connected and autonomous world. It's not done. We're a decade behind, at least a decade behind the rest of the world. Susan talked about Japan. We've just imported Australia's first fully autonomous bus as NTRO to do the use case work in partnership with the agencies and councils across Australia, because we're rushing down delivering, in some time in the future, some regulations and legislation uninformed by use cases. It's cart before the horse. So it's less about the infrastructure and more about understanding the use cases and the edge effects of those use cases to keep the network safe. The advantages of connected and autonomous transport are enormous in safety, resilience, sustainability, and finance, all of those critical international measures. An autonomous future is a safer future and a more productive and more connected future. No two ways about it. So the infrastructure, Charles, is the secondary issue. We haven't got to the first primary issue, which is can our agencies enable a future that is autonomous by bringing vehicles in and putting them on the network and developing the use cases and making it happen. we are not at that point yet. 2015, if we remember, we had Adelaide, where the Department of Infrastructure and Transport in Adelaide had some Volvos on the expressway operating in a linked and connected way in 2015. We've had a little pilot in the north of Melbourne run by the University of Melbourne. We've had TMR in Queensland run a little pilot in Ipswich and having a look at some vehicle to infrastructure sort of connectivity, but nowhere have we crossed state borders. Now, we've done some work with Defence to enable a leader-follower piece of work, but we couldn't get across state boundaries, this magic fence between states. So we're a long way behind. I was with Susan at the ITS World Congress in Atlanta, and one of the most poignant features was the presentation by a lady who was running the trucking company delivering fully autonomous trucking services in Texas. There's semi-trailers running down motorways, fully autonomous, staggeringly sophisticated operation. What's our great weakness in driving the economy? Doing it efficiently, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. We are a classic use case. So for me, it's less about the infrastructure, more about the enablement piece before we get to the infrastructure.
Yeah, and could I just add into that, Michael, our thinking as a toll road operator, or a private toll road operator, is changed quite dramatically as well. What we believe to be ready for the future is just to ensure that our road surface quality is high, our markings, our signage, our sensors, basically that we're able to interact with the technology that's galloping ahead out there. We just want them to be able to engage with us. So previously we thought it was infrastructure to vehicle. It's actually vehicle to vehicle communications and connectivity that's more important. And it's us engaging with third-party apps, if I can call it as such, as maps and location, to provide that seamless integration across the whole spectrum. So rather than roads being super smart, they're probably happy to be dumb, but it's how we have the technology that makes us smarter, if that makes sense.
And
Susan,
this is to Toby's point, Charles, right? So Toby was saying that the technology waves are going to come.
Yeah.
And we've come a long way in technology since 2015. We're now LiDAR, radar capable in vehicles now. In every vehicle, new vehicle imported into Australia, we can run in a fully autonomous mode at level 3 automation. Just the rules don't allow the vehicles to operate in that level 3 autonomous operations. So and by 2035, they'll all be off the shelf level 4 ready autonomous vehicles for sure and certain. So it's less about infrastructure and more about the enablement piece and the need for Australia to move down this enablement pathway.
Correct. I totally agree with you. Susan, let's talk about AI. What's the role of AI in transport infrastructure, and reflect on your Japanese study tour? Where do you see AI creating the greatest value for transport operators and road users?
Yeah, I think very much we're going to see AI connecting the dots, in that we've got lots of, at the moment, there's a number of disparate systems. So looking for AI to leverage, and give us much greater insights and better real-time information about what's going on to really enhance the way we manage traffic and congestion in our cities. So we really need to get better value out of our infrastructure by making it work harder, providing that real-time insights to nudge people in the right direction so that we can, get better throughput on our cities and systems. I think also just reflecting on Michael's comments before around the invisible fences at our state borders. We're strong believers that ITS Australia is working to look at what's happening internationally, but looking at harmonising within Australia where we can, so that we can look at pockets of excellence within Australia and then really leverage that and try to roll that out nationally. We can't have different systems in different states. We're a relatively small country, want to have national solutions that enable us, when we lean into this emerging technology, that we've got a standardised way of rolling that out. But AI is, having a profound impact every day in our workplaces, and certainly in terms of providing, better insights to help us to manage our transport network. That's where we see that playing a big part.
You're spot on, Susan. I mean, technology is international, yet we tend to think around states and territories and that we're distinct little islands in this nation. The sooner we break those barriers, the happier we'll all be. So we've been spending a lot of time about the physical infrastructure, talking about data and the way we utilise that information and around AI. Toby, over to you. Let's talk about the intergenerational equity issue. So how do we ensure infrastructure decisions that we make today continue to deliver value for future generations?
Yeah. It's an interesting one. One of the things I reflect on is the phrase being born on the wrong side of the tracks. So how and where we build our infrastructure is both a reflection of social equity and a determinant of future social outcomes. So the very nature of what we do will inform what we do today, will inform that piece. I think we started with the data piece, and I think really using the data to inform that. I think if I reflect, in Rahila's generous introduction, she spoke about some of the work I did in Melbourne, where we mapped at a metropolitan scale, where there was tree canopy cover and vegetation. And we know all of the associated health and broader benefits, broader resilience outcomes, where there's connectivity with nature, using it to reduce floods, etc. And there's a direct correlation between the lack of green infrastructure and poverty. And so, what we do, how we then develop our infrastructure so that, A, we're servicing communities that are currently underserved, so they're better tied in from a physical and all of the associated benefits that come from that, so that we also are thinking not just about traditional infrastructure, but very much in the emerging sort of fields of blue and green infrastructure. So how are we using nature to deliver some of the outcomes? Now, again, often this is a transport conversation primarily, but how are we using different forms of stormwater runoff, other kinds of green infrastructure to support our transport things. And so I think the final sort of thing on this that flows from that piece is, what is the infrastructure that we're not building in the future because we're better maintaining today, or we're using, again, better modeling to determine a range of things in terms of what best serves people, and then through to, in some ways, an individual road, an individual piece of high-speed rail, whatever it might be, will have only so many impacts upon the future generations. But if we take a look at two of the mega trends we have that are going to impact our children and their children, climate change and ecosystems losses, we know, say, for example, where an IS rating is applied on the 29 projects completed in 2025, that saved over $1 billion, almost $1.3 billion in reduced materials and so forth. And so sometimes things that to some people in certain decision-making places may seem a little bit esoteric or not having real-world impacts. The reality is, when we think intergenerationally, managing those impacts around climate, around the materials that we use, is really will have a profound impact on the intergenerational piece. So I think it works to wrap all that up. It works at two scales. One is the broad and high level scale about how do we actually change the way that we deliver our infrastructure to address some of those mega trends. And then there's the local piece about how do we think differently about how we do things to be more inclusive.
Wonderful. This is a question for all of you. If you had $1 billion, somebody just gifted you $1 billion in your respective portfolios, what would you invest it in infrastructure today? What would you do? Michael, could I start with you?
Without hesitation, Charles, it would be delivering the connected infrastructure. As a roads engineer all my life, I would spend the billion building the connectivity links across our networks. You still can't, I'm in Canberra today. I can't drive from Canberra to Orange, where our bus is located, I don't have full connectivity in that journey. I can't function, I can't work, let alone having a fully connected vehicle, talking to other vehicles, talking to the cloud. The simple highway systems, A roads and B roads, we must have linear connectivity. That is where I'd spend the money.
Susan probably has the answer to how to deliver all that. Your members would anyway. Over to you, Susan. If you had that $1 billion, what would you do?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Certainly got some members that'd be happy to help spend that $1 billion for sure. But I must say, I do find it surprising that on our major highways that we still have moments that we lose connectivity. It's really key to transport and transport safety that we have accurate and drivers have accurate real-time information. And I think it's a real gap in our digital infrastructure at the moment. And it continues to surprise me that it fails to be addressed one way or another. But from my point of view, I would add a layer to, maybe we're going to have $3 billion overall, but I would add a layer to Michael's connectivity to really look at the data that we have underlying that, so that we've got that connectivity, then we can get accurate real-time data around what are the speed limits, what are the hazards on the road ahead, what are the road conditions that we need to be aware of. But then also leveraging that across our public transport network. Do we have real-time information about when all of our buses across the country are due to arrive, and then even active transport, cycling and bike paths. So, and the benefit of data is that it supports people both in the vehicles that they've got today, but also is needed down the track for connected and automated vehicles, so that they can have quality data that is automated vehicle ready, and that those automated vehicles can respond to and react to with confidence, knowing that it's of the right quality, and it doesn't need a human in the loop to verify that, yeah, that data is correct. I should be responding to that. So I think that's an opportunity in Australia. And
Toby, where would you invest that $1 billion?
So I promise, Charles, I will get to your question.
Okay.
I've just been reflecting as I was listening to Michael's connectivity comments, Susan's data comments, which the two flow, on how infrastructure has driven social norms and outcomes. And the one that I'm particularly thinking about is clocks and the standardization of time, which really came about with the railway networks around the world, because if you're following a sundial, then as you travel, the time moved with you. And so when they started to put in timetables, that didn't work anymore. And so we had to develop clocks that were mechanized and independent of the sun. So there was a direct relationship between an infrastructure need and a social norm. Where I'm going with that potentially random seeming comment is the ongoing lack of harmonization in Australia. And we always say, oh, well, we've got a federated system, you got to live with it. It's all very difficult, and, and so on. And I actually think, we have historically a case study where to get the outcomes that we need in order to be able to run our infrastructure effectively, we have changed not just in one society, but the global society, and a whole bunch of things that has come with the different measurement of time. So I think that $1 billion being spent on genuinely harmonizing a range of standards, including connectivity, including how we measure things, be that from a safety performance. I mean, I think Michael's opening with those 4 areas around safety, sustainability, resilience, finance. What a great framing for so much of what we need to do in this space. And I think if we could have harmonization and consistency across certainly at least 3 of those, being safety, sustainability, resilience, but actually where the 4th one comes in, the better we're able to manage them, the more that we're then able to do innovative financing structures and so on, to attract both existing capital and new forms of capital to support the outcomes that we want.
let's just throw a dose of reality now. We know the public purse is being stretched for everything from social infrastructure to road transport infrastructure. Is there a role for the private sector here? And if there is a role, what is that role in terms of for it to play in terms of future-proofing the Australian transport network? Michael.
Yeah, let me just dwell on this dose of reality for just a second. I'll share my screen for everybody to just take you on a little reality check of why this linear connectivity is important. This is our digital platform where we overlay all these data sets. It's not the point I want to make. The point I want to make is when it loads is this. To Susan's point, these are in-vehicle data sets. This is not probe data. This is not Bluetooth data. This is live data out of vehicle feed connected to the cloud where we can see where the vehicles are, what speed they're going, where they're queued. So that physical infrastructure, we talked before, Charles, you were saying, what do we need in the physical infrastructure? Well, we don't anymore. We have all of this real-time data. Why we have to be cloud connected is because we've got the real-time data. On our platform, we can now use agentic AI. So we can now query, what are the locations where the 85th percentile of speed is more than the speed limit? And this is Perth. And Claire Thompson will be interested in this from Perth. And we can map today, right now, live on the Perth network, what vehicle speeds are in excess of the 85th percentile, where to send the police resources, where are the schools, we can dot the schools in, where are they at risk? We can do that now. This is the power of the data sets that we have. This platform enables this to happen now. We can do it right now. So we're in a marvelous position to be able to do what we said we're going to do and deliver these fundamental changes that, people like Toby, the society is looking for. We just don't have this sense of urgency out of government. And you ask what the private sector can do. Well, my prediction, Charles, is that the private sector is just going to keep doing. They're going to Uber the current rules around who owns infrastructure, who uses it, to what capability do they use it, what's the safest route I can go. They should be able to get online and go, well, I'm transporting a pallet of stone fruit from Stanthorpe to Melbourne. What is the smoothest route? We can tell them that data set. If I'm moving a wind turbine from Brisbane to Warwick, what's the fastest route, or what's the safest route? What's the least number of incidents? We can tell them that data set right now. So my view of the private sector is going to have their hands into all of these future journeys. Our states are too slow. The Commonwealth is missing in this space. So the private sector is really going to get their hands into changing the way in which the system functions, just like Uber did for the passenger journey. The private sector and the data owners, the data people who have access to data and can map this data, like NTRO, will be enabling journeys of the future. That's the space that the private sector is going to play. They'll fund, they'll deliver the resilience and sustainability outcomes, they'll communicate effectively with the community, and they'll make sure that we get safer outcomes on our road systems.
How well engaged are your members with that data set, that tool that you have? I mean, how widespread is it, Michael?
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
So the utilisation is really low. WA is at the lead of the pack, and Queensland's not far behind them. The other states, missing in action, really. So our East Coast and our West Coast are on a really clear journey. They understand it, they understand the need for it, and they're fully engaged in the integration of data. It's the integration journey and the overlay journey that I've talked about that is absolutely critical for our future. It's no longer, as I keep saying, it's no longer just about the infrastructure. It's who uses it, for what purpose, how are we servicing the freight and economic growth tasks, how are we servicing the community connectivity tasks. They're different questions today.
There you go. Susan, a lot of your members are private sector members. How do you think they can get engaged with future-proofing transport?
Yeah, and I think private sector is going to be key to driving a lot of the innovation and bringing it to reality, with government really trying to set clear direction and make sure that there's a regulatory pathway for them to move forward in, and then stepping in and filling the gaps as needed to, or providing nudges and incentives. So I just share perhaps a bit of a perspective from Texas, if I may. When we were over there 12 months ago, again on a study tour, we talked to 3 major freight companies over there, all doing driver out, heavy vehicle freight operations, either on public roads, but into the oil fields in Texas, or others doing 12-hour line haul journeys within Texas, or doing within the city, in the urban environment, deliveries from warehouses out to the stores. And they were very successful in terms of collaborating with the private sector and with government to get this automated freight system up and running. It was very much led by the private sector. They were doing a great job with engaging with the local community, because they were incentivized to make sure this worked and it went smoothly. Like, they were all on the pathway to IPO, so they wanted to make sure that there were no errors and no mistakes, no big accidents to report, but also that the community were engaged and part of the journey. So it was really fascinating to see this example of how the private sector was really driving this innovation, with hand in hand with government, who were there on the journey, but very much being steered by industry, who were the leading innovators in this space. So I think it's interesting to look at examples elsewhere and how we can really lean into the power of innovation from the private sector, and government can be there really as a supporter to bring these opportunities and technologies to bear for our communities.
Just in terms of that sustainability piece, Toby, who are the better guardians for sustainability and equity? Is it the private sector or the public sector? Do they need to be incentivised in a particular way, or is it just good corporate citizenship, both public and private, that we should all be focused on in this area of sustainability?
So I think it is a combination of both. Again, for those who don't know the ISC, I won't talk about ISC too much, but we provide a ratings program that assesses the sustainability performance of infrastructure as it's planned, designed, built, and operated. And some of our large members go, well, you should just be certifying us that we are a responsible company. And I'm not going to name names, but you can take scroll through corporate catastrophes of the last decade, and you will see that companies that are really well run have really bad mistakes. So I think that just leaving it to good corporate citizenship in itself is not the answer. Equally, we don't want to so regulate industry that we impact the innovation. And I think there is a strong argument for saying that actually, if you look at the challenges around productivity in Australia's construction sector, part of that is as a consequence of over-regulation. So how we regulate smart is also really important. But I think the current example of the recently introduced Australian Sustainability Reporting Standards is, in the short term, I think actually it's leading to unintended consequences, where companies are being less innovative because they're saying, oh my goodness, this $1 million I was going to spend on incentivizing a great sustainability outcome, I'm now going to give to our CFO so that they can do a compliance thing. But it's a moment in time. In a few years, that reporting that the government has demanded, that then sets the guardrails, then it's up to companies to report and then to innovate within that. I think it's not a bad kind of example of, again, on the one hand, I know there's a certain amount of pushback in some quarters around the impost of doing this, but certainly for our largest companies, most of them were close to already being there. So I think the role of government is work out how to set the rules of the field And in doing that, also work out what's the other, I think there should be a kind of 2-for-1 type framing. If we bring in one set of regulations, what does it allow us to remove so that we're strengthening guidelines in one area and we can increase innovation and flexibility in others? I don't mean that as a hard and fast thing, but as a kind of mental setting. We can't just keep adding burden on burden. We've got to get the right settings and also free industry to do what it does best, which is to innovate.
Great. Now, we've spoken a lot about data and data being dynamic, but also demand for transport is dynamic as well in terms of the different modes and types, etc. What is the plan, do you think, that we need around keeping these models and policies time-proofed, particularly transport policy time-proofed? An example, land use developments, economic growth areas, also environmental impacts. These could all create a snowball effect. Michael, what's your reflection on that? What do you think?
Yeah, we've crossed the line, Charles, from, in my view, thinking about a transport plan as a separate thing to a societal plan. So we've got system failures in Australia. We haven't built the number of houses we need to build. We haven't got public transport in the right places. We haven't got infrastructure reaching out to where it needs to go. So we've got system failure, and we're at this inflection point where we've got to stop doing this. It's his fault, her fault. They didn't do, and stop and pause and go, what is the system solution we need to have? How are we going to function as a society? What are the outcomes we want to achieve? I don't hear that conversation anywhere in the country, but in my view, that is what is needed. It's not just about transport, it's about system thinking and changing and acting within a system framework. That's going to deliver us this next generation of the way in which we live and work and the way in which we connect with others in our community and how we connect across Australia.
Susan?
Yeah, I think that it's really challenging to think about how we keep the right policy frameworks in a rapidly changing environment. So I think we need to have a look at what's happening internationally, make sure we keep on board with those perspectives, but then lean into what the private sector can bring our way as well, and just providing that clear pathway and goals for people, I think, in terms of what the opportunities are going forward.
Toby?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to pick up on Susan's use of the word goals there. So, not for the first time in Australia's sporting history. So the FIFA World Cup is going on at the moment. We managed to have a great win against Turkey, and suddenly we're very excited about now winning the World Cup. And I think where this links to some of the conversation is, I believe Australia, and I've had the privilege of working quite a lot internationally, I believe that Australia is absolutely world leading in running pilots. We run some of the best pilots anywhere, but we are not capable, to go kind of draw further from my World Cup analogy, we take one win and we think we're world beating, rather than going, it's actually about the consistency and the ability to do it every single time across all of our states and territories that determines how far and how advanced we really are. And so I think whether it's about how we set the goals, it's about then how we enable how we remove barriers in some places, and how we get really clear on what are the things we need to protect, maintain through legislation and otherwise. It's that whole playing field that needs to be set right in order to achieve the outcomes we want.
They're all great responses, and thank you, Sarah, for providing that question. So just take that to the next step. I know things like when things happen globally, we tend to have a huge impact here locally. So, for instance, the current Iran conflict has really had a lot of people starting to think about EVs, where previously we're very happy with our fuel guzzlers and prepared to go along that path. High spike fuel prices, and all of a sudden there's a huge interest in EVs, and it looks like when doing a sort of a road to Damascus conversion, everyone wants to get their next EV on the road. Prior to this, a lot of people were a bit hesitant, not only on the range anxiety, putting that aside, but the other aspect was around safety. In terms of, be it cybersecurity safety, but personal safety, safety to other users of the road. What do you think would need to happen in this space to ensure that we get that next big leap? So we've made the leap from fuel to EVs. How do we get the use of utilising from EVs to, connected and automated transport at all its levels? Because people are a bit hesitant of using that. So what do you think, and I'll open that up into all the panelists, what do you think is the next big thing that's going to happen to move us along that path? Or needs to happen?
For me, Charles, it's the connectivity piece, and all EVs, and in fact all new vehicles, are fully connected now. So there's about 6-7% of the fleet operates in a fully connected environment where they're constantly in touch with the cloud, and every new vehicle is in that space. So the fleet in Australia, the average age of the fleet's about 13 years old. So over the next decade, we will move from a small percentage of the fleet being fully connected to the majority of the fleet being fully connected. And once it's fully connected, you then have the vehicle-to-vehicle communication capacity. You have what Susan was talking about earlier, where you can advise where there's roadworks, where there's an incident. You can push information into vehicles to advise of opportunities to travel a bit safer, slow down, things ahead, advise them about journey times, advise people about safety outcomes, advise people to stay awake. So that is, the cusp of that is already here. I think the next big leap is going to be vehicles being much smarter. That the journey for vehicle intelligence is increasing. The next big wave will be fatigue. So cameras in vehicles and fatigue warnings. It's already in the heavy vehicle fleet, vibrating seats and alarms. It's penetrated into some of the high-end passenger vehicle fleet, but it'll become the norm. Vehicles that don't leave the road, vehicles that automatically stop, vehicles that have fatigue warning. So we're getting high quality infrastructure, we're getting high quality vehicles, we're providing drivers with a much, much safer environment, yet at the same time we're killing more people on our roads. To Toby's point before, every agency has set a target of a 50% reduction in deaths and a 30% reduction in serious injuries by 2030. And that's a blink away, and our road tolls going up. So we've got a fundamental behavioural societal problem to fix that nobody's addressing. So we've got these wonderful advancements in technology and wonderful levels of expenditure on infrastructure right across Australia. Every jurisdiction, we're still building wonderful pieces of infrastructure, but at the same time, we're killing more people in our road systems.
And the conversation really hasn't shifted for a long time. I recall about a month ago, it was one of the headline news items. A Tesla driver was actually asleep at the wheel of his car as it was crossing the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And the message was almost, oh, shock, horror, how dangerous is this? As opposed to the flip side saying, well, look at the technology, it's pretty safe. The man's asleep at the wheel, okay. And the journey was safe. I don't want to address all the regulatory issues here and whatever, but certainly the conversation hasn't changed. We still have that old world thinking, yet the technology is galloping ahead.
But that's the point, Charles, about governments keeping up. In this space, and that's my point before, the private sector is not going to wait for governments to wake up and change the rules and be genuine partners. We've been on this journey for a decade, but it stopped 15 years ago. We've done nothing as a coordinated nation of moving down the connected and automated pathway. We've done nothing as a nation. So the lack of sort of central guidance and advice and creating the platform so that we can have these Tesla level 3s and level 4s operating on the network. We can be inviting to that generation of technology across Australia, safer and smarter and more connected. It's part of the future of a safer, smarter, connected, more productive future. We're not engaged, so we're going to get Ubered. I mean, citizens will not wait for government to allow things to happen anymore. We're way beyond that. And
So
we're a
true.
nation of disruptors, generally speaking. We've been comatose over the last 20 years, but you can see Australians just breaking out now and going, I'm over it. Why am I being denied the best technology? Why am I being denied the connectivity? Why am I being denied a high quality freight route from Melbourne to Brisbane to Sydney, to Melbourne to Sydney to Brisbane? These things just must happen. Why am I building a fast rail from Sydney to Newcastle when the highest demand is Melbourne to Sydney? Some of this stuff that doesn't make sense. People are going to go, enough. It's time that we took control back. And as private citizens in the private sector, we're going to have enormous disruption as the insanity of waiting stops and people just get on.
And you're right. Australians are great adopters of technology. I think we have the highest penetration of mobile phone usage. I think within 3 years of it being launched. So, it's in our nature that we love technology and adopt it early. Susan, how do we change that conversation? And I know your members are really strong about moving this along too. So.
Yeah, and I think it's really that nexus of we need the connectivity to have the data flowing. We need the strong data backbone because we need to have good information going out to these automated vehicles, but then the smart vehicles are part of that as well. So as Michael was saying around the detection of driver alertness, we're starting to see our members rolling out their technology into light vehicles to make sure that when they need to be paying attention, that the drivers are paying attention. But then at other times, if it's fully automated, perhaps it doesn't need to be. So, just a whole smart ecosystem. So that's when we talk about digital infrastructure. That's really key to make sure that we've got the connectivity and we've got the data and we've got the smart cars that can bring all of that together. And as we're moving more strongly into electric vehicles, as Michael was saying, they are all connected. So we've got that ability for the data to flow, but we don't necessarily have that ecosystem of quality data yet that's informing the vehicles that is what we're going to need if they're to be operating in an automated fashion across our network. So we really need all of that to come together to make sure we can have safer roads, make sure it's more productive, because we want our vehicles to not just be automated, but we want them to be connected as well.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm about to agree or disagree with what the rest of you have said, in that, Charles, your framing was around people buying EVs and so forth. For me, the similarity is around like the energy transition, where we're seeing one of the, and very much in keeping with your mobile phone comment, we've seen one of the highest uptakes of domestic solar installation. But had we had consistent government policy that had in any way matched that, trying to hit our 2030 emissions targets and then renewable energy targets wouldn't have been an issue. In the same way that one of my sort of tongue-in-cheek lines is about sort of lack of rail here is, well, you've got to understand, for an amazing, kind of high speed and other rail network, what you really want is a large flat country that's, not overly dense and so forth. You go, oh, right, well, maybe we could have had that. But sort of facetiousness aside, the really important point is oh, I just lost my thread there. I shouldn't have been facetious. It is about the interplay. And again, it goes back to the role of government. What's the role of government? To set the frameworks correctly and then not to hold things back. So yes, we are seeing EV uptake, but we're not seeing it to the extent that we perhaps should be. And part of that is because it's still partly tied in with ridiculous conversations with around our energy future and the climate change piece and so forth. So actually, we still really aren't setting our infrastructure up right to really take advantage of the EV opportunity. And I think the only thing, sort of final thing I'd say, that depending on which angle you're looking from, is either in loud agreement with Michael and Susan or slightly off, but is around this point of kind of people getting comfortable with technology and so forth, and that is, I I think the importance of price and availability. So if you said to someone, how highly do you rate the safety of your family? They would say above all else. But if you say, I can offer you a ticket to Bali for your family holiday for half the price, people go, yeah, forget they leap on that. And so I think a huge part of the uptake in EV is less about if people are happy to put aside their data and cyber concerns if they think that they will get the outcome that they need at a better price.
Okay, that's been a very good conversation today. I just want to leave you with one final question, and I'll only give you 30 seconds each because I then will pass back to Rahila. In terms of what is the single most important requirement to future-proof our transport infrastructure, and it could be across all sectors, so it could be aviation, maritime, road, rail. What is the single most, and it could be philosophical, conceptual, it doesn't have to be deliverable today, but what is the single most important requirement for future transport? Susan. Michael. Go, Michael. Sorry.
I won't even need 30 seconds. It's national leadership. I'm done.
There you go. Susan.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, data and connectivity, but that's safe and secure. So that as a foundation for our national digital infrastructure.
So we've got leadership, data security, connectivity. Toby, finish it off.
Accept the science of climate change and make decisions as though it was real.
Perfect. I couldn't have asked for a better conclusion. Thank you all. I think Rahila needs to come on now, or wants to come on now. Yes? You're on mute.
Get my connectivity sorted. Thank you very much, Charles. Thank you, Susan, Toby, and Michael. That's been a really great conversation. If I heard anything, it was data. We're increasingly in a connected world, and data is really going to be the key to the development of our transport network. The title of this webinar was Rethinking Transport Infrastructure, and it's data that's going to allow us to change the way that we think about our infrastructure and what it looks like and what it needs to look like going forward. Thank you so much for our panelists being here today. Thank you also to our audience, especially those that asked questions both prior and during the session today. I hope you'll have noticed that your questions were being incorporated by Charles as well. And we really value you taking the time to be with us today. We will provide a recap on the CCAT website shortly, and we'll also publish a recording as well. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and please do enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.